to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, July 10th. We're back. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Morganoni, and I am joined by Matthew Betz and Mike Wright.
Welcome in. How you boys doing?
Doing all right. How was the 4th for everybody?
Oh, patriotic as ever. I mean, America. Am I right? It was fun, man. We were at my in-laws' lake house. A little time on the boat. Got the girls out on the water for a bit. Played some golf. Played horribly. But, flipped some burgers on the grill. It was pretty much your all-American weekend.
Nice. I was at my pool house, which is just my house because I have a pool.
I was going to
say, Mike.
Kyle, what did you do?
I did.
Well, he's just over here. He's like, I was at a lake. He's all fancy, and I'm like, I stayed home and I grilled.
Well, when you were talking, it's like I've been to your house, Mike. Like I was like, man, a pool house. Mike must have added on this really cool pool house in the back that he never showed anyone.
It's a 5-bedroom.
I did have a funny moment talking to my kids. I was like, hey, do you guys know why we do the 4th? And I was like, oh, did they want a history lesson? It's like they had no clue. No clue. My kids are young, but it's like they were just like, well, we just get together because of America. And I was like, well, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, basically.
What I did really appreciate, Kyle, about your 4th of July weekend, imagine never logging off Twitter. Like, it literally couldn't be me, so I'm always logged on. And I see at Kyle_Borg post far too many minutes of Will Levis playing quarterback in the NFL on the Sunday of 4th of July weekend. Kyle, I am begging you, brother, go outside. Please see some sunlight. I mean, if you're doing that on like a Wednesday, during normal work hours, that's fine. But on 4th of July weekend, I mean, that is just next level. So that is the amount of attention Kyle gives this show. It gives, the listeners, the audience, his content, because I know you need it. But Kyle, brother, please see some sun.
36 minutes of Will Levis didn't do anything for you?
That is
too much. I watched some of it and was like, whew, these are. I mean, you could put on the Benny Hill music during that thing and it would be just fine.
It was a roller coaster ride because a lot of times it was back-to-back plays where it was like, oh my gosh, this is a 40-yard deep play where like Chris Moore had a ton of plays in there. And then the next play is like sack, fumble.
Yeah.
The other team has the ball and they're totally screwed. But in my defense, both my boys ended up being sick for the July weekend after that. So I was at home and just, me and Will Levis.
The play I had forgotten was it might have been a fumble or a pick. I can't remember, but it was the turnover. And then Will Levis runs out and like gets the ball back almost. I think it was all called back on a penalty.
It was against the Colts. He tried to do all this funny stuff. I mean, it was comedic.
I like the hustle. He's like, this was my fault. I better go fix the problem because I'm a man.
This wasn't supposed to be a Will Levis show, but I think the question is we're asking like, can it work? I mean, maybe, and maybe it probably won't.
He was extremely bad.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it a little bit today because we're going to talk through some of these Titans wide receivers and their dynasty values. So we're going to talk about it.
All right.
Okay, we'll save that there. On this show, we're going to be doing part 2 of our Dynasty wide receiver tiers. We'll talk about some of the rankings of players past the top 24. And I think for a lot of people, there's some movement of where these players are going to be in 2025. So it's like, I want to make my bet right now on this player and be on the right side of it as opposed to a year from now. It's like, oh man, I thought Treylon Burks was going to be in this tier. Speaking of Titans. Do they even consider him a Titan on the team? Like, does Callahan and the rest of the people like even consider him part of the team?
I don't know that they do.
They have not been kind.
No.
At all. Like, just very blunt. Like, oh yeah, no, like he'll do some kick return stuff.
Yeah.
It's like,
man. Pour one out.
So,
I mean, like, factor in the emotion part. I mean, I guess we have a new regime now, but it's like the last regime, like, it was a 1-for-1 replacement of A.J. Brown. Like, that is what happened. And we do it as fantasy football players. You love a guy, you're confident in him, you draft him high. It's a disaster. And now, like, your love, the equality or the equal side of the love has now flipped to that equal of hatred. I think that's what happened to the Titans.
The Titans are a dynasty team that just said, hey, we're going to keep going with this formula. We're going to see if it works. We're going to trade, our wide receiver and get a 1, because a 1 could be anything. It could even be A.J. Brown. And then it came crashing down. I mean, the regime's over. I looked at it. Vrabel came in 2018, and they made the playoffs the first 4 years. They were a 1 seed one year. I don't know if you guys remember that. Like, they were awesome.
Yeah, they're fun.
And then just come crashing down. So before we get into this, I did want to mention some of the stuff that we've been updating in the Ultimate Draft Kit, ultimatedraftkit.com. The Dynasty Pass, we're adding in a couple new things. Like I have a Dynasty Tiers article for the wide receivers that is exclusive just to that. We'll go through this giant list, so we're not going to mention every single guy. That's in there. Betz, you're working on a monster article right now for training camp preview that goes through every single team, and we'll talk about that. But the Draft Analyzer is out right now. If you want to analyze your Dynasty team, Mike, I know you just won a championship, but do you like your own team according to your projections and rankings?
I do.
That's a good feeling.
That might surprise you that I love my good players.
So you can get in that, ultimatedraftkit.com, and we're going to continue to add resources all throughout the offseason. Guys, a month really until we start seeing some preseason action. So speaking of action, Betz, you're writing this article about training camp battles, and that's my quick question for us. Which training camp battle are you most interested in? And for Dynasty, this is shifting the running back 2, running back 3, some of these wide receiver battles. So Betz, why don't you start off first? Which battle are you looking at right now for training camp?
Zach Moss is like, I'm losing sleep at night, boys.
You guys are sick. Mike, you are sick. Betz, you are sick.
Okay, everything in this player's, from when he entered the NFL till now says this is a bad bet, right? Like just running backs that are thrust into RB1 opportunities that have never really been talented or
did you hear my stat from the main show?
Hit me with it. Do you have it in front of you?
I do. So I went back from 2014. So running backs drafted 2014 moving forward. We have 71 players who have finished inside the top 24 at least one time. And guys who hit their first top 24 season in year 5 of their career. Like of those 71 players, it was 3. And 2 of those players were undrafted free agents. And the other one was James White. Like the archetype of the player who in year 5 is ready for a breakout is there's 3. So it was 4.2% of the 71 in my sample size. So I'm with you. I don't want to steal your thunder for the argument, but I am also losing sleep on Zach Moss.
I mean, yeah, just that stat that you just shared says like this shouldn't work and probably won't work, but maybe it'll work for us. But then I was going back, this monster article, which is it's gonna be like 10,000 words, so you're gonna need some time off of work to actually read it. Basically, is looking at like some of the advanced numbers and like how could this work and who's gonna take the job. And it's like, man, in this offense, like Joe Mixon's a pretty good NFL running back. He's not elite. He's definitely better than some other ones.
He's fine.
Yeah, he's fine. But he gets the job done. He does what he's asked. And Chase Brown, I'm not sure, is going to do that. He was asked to pass block on 8 total snaps last year. He played the most in a single week last year, 30% of the snaps. Like, they never really gave him a workload. And so at worst, to me, this is a 50-50 split with, in theory, Chase Brown getting quote-unquote passing work and Zach Moss getting the early down work and certainly the goal line work. Joe Mixon was top 5 in the NFL in carries inside the 10-yard line last year, and we know that this team is going to run out of shotgun. That's what Zach Moss did very, very well a year ago. So I kind of find myself on both sides of it where I'm like, this archetype doesn't work. And then I like dig into the numbers and the football scheme and the offense with Joe Burrow before being injured last year. They were top 8 both seasons in points per play when he's been healthy. So it's an offense we like. Vegas is projecting a ton of points. They're top 10 in points projected scored this year. I think he could just be like fine from a talent standpoint, but literally fall in the end zone 11 times and you're like, there's the RB15 this year, right? So like I see both sides of it where like in Dynasty, I might be using this little opportunity to be like, you know what, I may never get a chance to trade away Zach Moss ever again. But at the same time in redraft circles, like I kind of get it and I'm kind of in on Zach Moss.
So let me put this to the test. So you're a running back needy team. You see Zach Moss out there. You're like, hey, I'd love to get an RB2 this year. What's the price? Is it the second round pick?
I think it's the second. And that
I
to
think
me
the
is fair.
second is fair.
Okay.
And
you just don't want it to be Madison.
Yeah, you do not want that to happen.
That's the worst case scenario in this. Is you're trading for a player who's never done it before, now gets the role, and you're like, oh gosh, he's inefficient.
Yep. That's the concern.
Yeah, and it's like that and Zamir White, who, like, if you're making the bet right now, bets for your dynasty team, you can flip a second. Are you going to take Zach Moss? So the older player, further along in his career, yet to me seems more likely to hit the volume thresholds that we need for a top 24 running back, because it's him and Chase Brown running it. Or Zamir White, who, look, he's a year 3 player. We haven't seen very much of him. We've really just seen a 4-game sample, and he was way better than his teammate Josh Jacobs in that when he got to do it. Who are you trading for?
Man, if we're using bicep size as the indicator here, I mean, Zamir is...
Well, that's breaking news.
The dude is rocked, okay? If you haven't seen, go on Twitter.
Yeah.
There's a picture going around. This man's biceps are bigger than my quads, okay?
Bro, it looks like his forearms, like the angle of the picture is like his forearms are as big as his biceps. He's just looking like just absolutely gigantic.
Which, in all seriousness,
looking
like
like
will this guy
Popeye.
actually be able to run because his arms and legs are so huge? But just from a
Can he hold a
just
ball?
from a talent standpoint, like both guys to me are kind of similar. Like I don't think either one is great. I think Zamir White was so fortunate last year in the games where they were able to actually get out to a lead and just milk the clock, which is what Antonio Pierce wants. That's what Luke Getty wants. That was all well and good, but they played against like Easton Stick for part of the season there when he was at the end. There was a couple games there where they got ahead with like backup quarterbacks. They had the weird like Christmas miracle fluky victory over the Chiefs. Like, I don't know. Vegas is not projecting, sportsbooks are not projecting this team to be very good. They are favored in just 2 games all year. One of those is against the Panthers. The other one is the Broncos. So like, I get that Antonio Pierce wants to run the ball. I get that the identity wants to be, let's be tough. Let's hand it off every play. This is the identity of the team. That's all well and good. But can you do that when you're down 2 scores in the third quarter, right? And I'm just not sure. So to me, I'd rather take the better offense, better touchdown upside with Zach Moss. I'm very worried about Zamir White from a team level standpoint.
It makes sense. I mean, just from a team, which team's going to score more? You lean on Moss, and he's going to be on the field a ton. He's going to be there on passing downs a lot. Chase Brown had his little sprinkle moment, but
and Zach Moss was
the dynasty aspect
good
of Moss, right? Like Zamir is young. Like, in dynasty, you usually want to bet on the younger running back. It's those two in particular this year I'm very excited to see how that plays out.
All right, Mike. So you have another backfield that Betz and I were literally just talking about before we recorded. What do we do with J.K. Dobbins? We found out his guaranteed money, by the way.
Oh,
Mike,
it's very low, right?
It's $50,000.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, that's
for context. Can I just read you some names that signed higher guaranteed money recently?
Undrafted free agents are getting more than that.
DJ Dallas recently. Cordell Patterson. I mean, that's not a surprise because he's the GOAT. Amir Abdullah.
Yeah.
Boston Scott. So like they basically paid for his like travel expenses to move to LA.
Oh man.
I mean, just in all seriousness, like we've never really seen a running back as talented as he is when he's healthy get that type of just pocket change for the NFL, right? Like that's crazy. So I don't even know if he makes the team.
Yeah, and so the answer, it's the Chargers running backs, because this is nothing should work. Absolutely nothing should work. If you're just looking at a profile of Gus Edwards, who what year is he in? 6 or 7? And I mean, yeah, he's had small showings of success. I mean, the 5 a carry stuff, but he's very old. He has never like really been the guy for a team. And then it's J.K. Dobbins is the first backup, who is coming off an Achilles tear, which I'm going to bet against that every single time. Year 1 return for a running back. And then it's a third-round draft pick, third day. If it was a third-round draft pick, that'd be a lot more exciting. A third-day draft pick in Kamani Vidal-Sassoon. And it's like none of these things should work. None of them. And yet, something should work for the Hard Dog team here.
Yeah, I think that right now, if you guess this correctly, you're going to get 10 touchdowns. But it's really trying to figure out, can the Gus bust last? I mean, that's where I would have it. I think.
Are you going Gus or are you going Vidal?
I can't think of him other than Vidal Sassoon.
This is Jason's fault.
Jason's good at what he does. Yeah, I think the problem with day 3 running backs is it's just a bad bet. And it's a bad bet when they get steamed up over the summer. And we've already seen that before any training camp stuff, right? Like if you're playing best ball, Sassoon's gone up like 50 or 60 picks in the last 2 months.
Yeah,
based
but
on
our recency bias is Isaiah Pacheco.
That's the only one though. That like if we take the rest of the subset, we're like, none of those guys work. We take one guy and we then put it on everyone else. So I'm on Edwards being the lead guy.
I think so too. I think just look at the money, right? Like he got a 2-year deal. He got low end starter money. We talked about the Dobbins contract. We talked about the Vidal selection on day 3. Like there's not a lot of financial investment here, period. But if there is one, it's Gus Edwards, and obviously has a ton of familiarity with Greg Roman. So it's gross, but I think he's probably the guy you want. The issue is he's been missing all of the offseason to this point, dealing with an undisclosed injury. So like I'm keeping my ears open for that in training camp and seeing what that is, because that could change things too here. So this is crazy, man. Like this backfield, with how much they want to run with this group, it, like you said, it just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. And this year, or like redraft, I mean, what are the 0 RBs doing right now? Like seeing just the insane value that is being presented, like just Zamir, Zach Moss, Gus Edwards. I mean, if one of those guys hits, they're all going so late that I don't blame people for loading up on wide receivers.
Yeah. You can win with, and we talked about Jalen Warren, other guys that either you got in Dynasty as an undrafted free agent or whoever, and you kind of load up and realize later, like, okay, well, I can make this work with a couple later guys that I took. And so in redraft, in Dynasty, I mean, if you have 4 or 5 wide receivers that you can just jump on board, like you can make it work. I wanted to bring up the Saints because,
sure,
one, I've never really liked the Saints. I like Chris Olave, but man, the Saints, division rival for the Falcons. And last year, they had it made. I think my famous words to Betz were, oh man, take it to the bank. The Saints over halfway through the year. It's going to happen. They had an easiest schedule. And then, of course, they go 3-6 in 1-score games, and they lose like a ton down the stretch of just winnable games. I mean, they had a chance to go to the playoffs in the very final week. Like it was percentage chance, but they just imploded. And so it's a different scheme this year. Derek Carr was so bad inside the red zone and really bad with 3 wide receivers because at the end of the year, it's like they weren't running out a ton of stuff. Olave was kind of banged up a lot of the year. And then you look at like what else they were trying to do. It's just A.T. Perry wasn't doing a ton. However, they did change to start use more 12 and 13 personnel, more tight end looks. And then I hate saying it, but Taysom was more and more involved and really good down the stretch inside the 20. And so you have a new system with Clint Kubiak, who's bringing over a San Francisco approach, which is heavy tight ends. You bring in the fullback sometimes. So I'm trying to figure out with this team, how does the running back room shake out? I think we presume Kamar's the guy, but he's been super inefficient. And then I hear Nick Underhill, who's the most plugged in beat writer that we all love for the Saints. He's talking up Jamal Williams as the back. I'm like, wait a second.
Oh, no. I hadn't heard that.
I know. I was like, he must be joking, right? It's Kendre Miller because in Dynasty, we know that we all love Kendre Miller as a sneaky play. So
Jamal Williams was doo-doo.
The worst. Like, literally the worst.
It was not good last year. I thought you were going to bring up the Taysom Hill, like he's been in the room with the running backs. And it's like, dude.
Yeah, I can expand.
If Taysom Hill's going goal line, good Lord.
A little on some of the Underhill stuff. I listened to the show that he was talking about that on, and it was like he kind of thinks that they would have loved for Miller to like show it by now and like take a step forward. And kind of like this offseason, he's saying that the feeling is that he might have taken a step back, which is really tough when it's the offseason. It's like you're in shorts, like you should be looking great. And so I think right now the word that he uses is just that Williams has the trust of the coaching staff, and Miller still needs to kind of earn that. Not saying it can't happen in camp and preseason, which obviously it can, but like, I think Miller on tape was great in college. We all loved him. He flashed in the preseason last year. Small sample, flashed in week 18 last year. And like, man, Jamal Williams was so bad. So like, part of me is like, I don't know, man. This seems a little sketchy. But also, if he doesn't do his job and Jamal's just kind of getting what's blocked for him and getting past pro, like,
and happy doing it
with the vibes, he might be on the field more than we like.
It's gross. Guys, like, it's one of those situations where you look at this offense and go, oh, sweet, they're going to be innovative. They're going to figure it out. I like this system. Baby Coobs is going to do it. And then I started thinking, are they even going to run enough 11 personnel? For a while, I was like, is it A.T. Perry? Is it Cedric Wilson? Is it rookie Bub Means, which is just always fun to say his name? And at the end of the day, they might just be running a lot more tight ends. They got to get Juwan Johnson healthy. It is a gross team because we've mentioned they were the least creative team when it comes to pre-snap motion in the entire NFL. And now you're going to a scheme that's maybe the most creative outside of like Mike McDaniel. So there's a lot of variables here. And then at the core of this, I have to ask this question. Is Derek Carr going to even like make any of this work? Like, does it even matter at all if he just stinks?
I mean,
league average. Come on, buddy. You can do it.
I think he is a league average, like 3,800, almost 3,900 passing yards, 25 touchdowns. Like, you give me that yardage, you bump those touchdowns up to the high 20s.
In grimaces.
Yeah. I mean, he needs to leave our boy Chris Olave alone.
Yeah, I think
it's your fault, Derek Carr. Everything's your fault.
I think Carr is the absolute, like, if you could pick the starting quarterbacks in the league to be like, you get no pre-snap motion, figure it out. Like, Carr would be on your short list of like, that dude is not going to make this work. Mahomes, Allen, those guys will make it work. So like, in theory, this is obviously very good for his efficiency. Like, keep the defense, on their heels. Like, get guys moving before the snap. Please get Rashid Shaheed moving before the snap and just let this dude burst up field. Like, that stuff will all, I think, help the offense. But we know what Derek Carr is at this point, right? So like, I'm not expecting a huge jump, but I think he'll be more efficient than he was a year ago when literally every snap was like, you know what? Where's Alvin Kamara 2 years down the field? Works for me. Here you go, Alvin.
Be on the lookout for that article. Betz is going through all 32 teams, their biggest training camp battles, so that you can basically be ready for August and be ready for everything coming out. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, before we talk about these wide receiver tiers, I went back because I'm a sick person, and I love our show docs, guys. I mean, there's so much information that I can pull from 2016, 17. I mean, we got a lot of stuff. But I went back to last year, this exact episode. And after we had gone through the main wide receivers, we had a question where we talked about which wide receiver, past wide receiver 50, do you want to bring up that, I don't know, maybe could take a jump? And Betz, I need to give you some props because you brought up Nico Collins. Maybe you just did it like, I don't know who to put down. But last year, he was wide receiver 64 in Dynasty rankings. And I bring his name up because a lot of these wide receivers we're going to talk about today, you might be like, I can't really see it. This is just where they are. But there is room for growth of so many players. We talked about last week. Puka Nacua wasn't in my top 2 tiers in my rankings last year. Mike, I don't know if you had him there at the beginning of the year, but
no, I did not.
I didn't even rank. I mean, we didn't even have him ranked. Like, no one did. So there is room for growth. But Betz, like, how does it feel? You totally forgot you said that, right?
No, I remember that vividly because you all laughed. You all laughed at me, Kyle. And it was awesome. I sent, not in every league, but in a couple leagues, I got him for like a late second last year of like, what the heck? He had played with Davis Mills, Kyle Allen, Tyrod Taylor, and we were all Stroud fans. And I was like, what if Stroud's just good? I'll throw a late second and hope for the best. So that worked out. That's one of those things that happens in Dynasty like once every like 4 years where you make a trade that sweet. But it does feel quite nice.
I have a rebuilding team that I had him on the roster and he was probably like my wide receiver 5 or 6. And then fast forward a year later, I had the picks. So I got Marvin Adunze, and then I've had Collins, Pity City, and I'm like restocked my wide receiver room where a year later I'm like, wow, I have a bunch of studs that I didn't even realize. And that's like one of the beauties of year to year, things can change. So I want to talk about these tiers and talk about where we rank these players.
Dynasty Rankings.
So we're talking about the guys that I'm calling tier 5. And like I said, there'll be an article out on all of this. If you want to get all of our rankings, they're in the Dynasty Pass. But I'm calling it at the crossroads because when you put players in tiers, they can't all be at the same exact age, same exact spot. But a lot of these guys are young. And then Deebo Samuel's in here too because that's where we have him ranked. But I'll list some of the guys: Zay Flowers, Ladd McConkey, Jordan Addison, Rashee Rice, Brian Thomas Jr., JSN, Deebo, George Pickens, and Jaden Reed. These guys are at different points of their career, but there's a lot of guys that are super young that we think can elevate themselves, or at least like, hey, they could be a top 15 wide receiver. We just don't have them ranked there right now. I wanted to bring up Jordan Addison first because I have him in a league, and if you would have told me, hey, by the way, Jordan Addison's going to have 10 touchdowns as a rookie, you'd be like, sweet. He killed it. This is what I wanted. He delivered on the value. He finished as wide receiver 21. And yet, it feels like a year later, he's dropped in value. I don't know if there's like the stench, and I know Kirk Cousins is the big reason why he's gone, but like we're almost penalizing him because Jefferson was off the field, and we're penalizing because it's a new quarterback, but this team throws. Like this team is going to continue to throw the ball. Last year, second in neutral pass rate, first in passing when they were leading by 7 points, second in second half pass rate, first in pass rate inside the 20. They throw a ton, and they're going to continue to throw even if they have McCarthy in there eventually. So what is y'all's feeling on Addison after year one? And is this appropriate, or is it like, okay, well, that's all we're ever going to see? That was his best season ever.
Go ahead, Betz.
I think there's room for improvement, obviously. Anytime a wide receiver flashes that much, as a rookie, you have to open your eyes and say, like, that's what we wanted to see, and he probably will take a step forward in year two. The issue for me is, when you look at the touchdown total, that's tough, right? Like, a lot of that production is probably going to come down this year, specifically, when you think about either Sam Darnold and or a rookie quarterback. I mean, we've talked about it on the main show. You guys bring it up all the time. It's just rookie quarterback touchdown rates just historically have not been a winning bet in fantasy. So I see a guy who overperformed in the touchdown department relative to his usage, add in a potential rookie quarterback, and I just see a player that I think it will all kind of balance out a little bit this year, where I don't really see Addison being able to take a step forward in dynasty value because of those factors. And, oh, by the way, Justin Jefferson still here, massive contract, and a lot of his production last year came with Justin Jefferson off the field. So I feel kind of lukewarm on Addison, which I think is how a lot of people feel. A fine like wide receiver 3 type for dynasty on my team, wide receiver 2 that I want to have, but I'm not like going out of my way to trade for him this offseason.
I think I would say, part of the how do you phrase it? Just like the disappointment of when Jefferson was off the field, it wasn't like a huge, or at least it didn't feel like a huge uptick in actual production. The target share, it certainly went up, and that makes complete sense. But like his yards per route run, it was the exact same as when Jefferson was on the field. That's not what you're hoping for a first rounder. You want someone who, when an opportunity presents itself, this guy just takes over the way like Justin Jefferson did. So I think that's what's baked in. And then I would say just what Betz said about Stroud. We like Stroud like a lot in last year's offseason, and I don't think we all feel the same about J.J. McCarthy, but I think he is good. I think that he will be a good quarterback in the NFL, and if they really keep the same pass heavy approach, and J.J. McCarthy ends up being good, then this would be the floor for Jordan Addison.
Yeah, that's been the Kevin O'Connell approach. Is they've been bottom 5 in rush attempts each of his first 2 years. So I think they're going to continue to press on the gas. I mean, last year, if it was Mullins, Jaron Hall, Josh Dobbs, whoever, he actually was targeted more frequently when Cousins was off the field. So it's like, I don't think the quarterback is really the issue for Addison. It's more of what is his ceiling knowing that Jefferson's here. So my question to kind of land the plane here is, why can't he be, this is my number, 85 to 90% of Devonta Smith? Same like kind of wiry player who is the wide receiver 2 on an offense that could be good. Like, that's kind of what I'm hoping he is. And it still caps him, but I mean, it's a good player. Like you said, a wide receiver 3 for your squad who's really young. And you saw him, like, he wasn't just getting little, dinks and dunks. Like, he was getting downfield, intermediate targets that really matter. So, what are y'all thoughts on that comparison?
I think that's a good, interesting comparison, because I think, just narratively speaking to me, it would make sense that if this all hinges on J.J. McCarthy, of course, that you have someone who's actually competent. But like, if that's what happens, then to me, there's no reason why Jordan Addison can't surpass Devonta Smith in terms of fantasy value, where Smith is he will be the number 2. He is a handsomely paid number 2, but he's the number 2 guy on a team that is a low passing volume. And unless something drastically changes here for, Jalen Hurts, like, Jalen Hurts is who he is. And it's going to be a heavy rush system for the Philadelphia Eagles, where if Minnesota keeps everything and then McCarthy actually ends up good on a high volume passing offense, you can actually sustain 2 high level fantasy wide receivers. So I'm talking myself into Jordan Addison a little bit more than I had been. I don't know if I would be aggressive out and going to get him, because thinking just in terms of the dynasty market, like, play out this year of, it will be probably a good chunk of it's going to be Sam Darnold. And because I think that's the good NFL approach for the Vikings. Their bye week is, I think, week 6 or 7, if I'm remembering it correctly off the top of my head, where it's like, okay, that's usually a pretty good transition point for get the rookie, put them in. And then at that point, you're not going to feel like you had enough of the season to really evaluate, is J.J. McCarthy good? Meaning that, to me, unless there's catastrophic failure by McCarthy, Jordan Addison, his value will remain kind of flat. And then maybe you can reassess and take a bet next year.
Yeah, I like that call quite a bit, because I think we all kind of share like some team level concerns about just production and points this year from the team. And Mike had tip, it is week 6 that they are on bye. So that's kind of the perfect timeline for that. I will just say, I don't think Kevin O'Connell cares. Like, Nick Mullins was chucking it on the stretch last year. And, they bring in Aaron Jones, right? He was still awesome down the stretch, especially in the playoffs as a runner. But when you think about Aaron Jones, where is he so good? It's as a pass catcher, right? Ty Chandler, same thing. Like, he's not really a bruiser. He's kind of a finesse back in space who can catch the ball. I think that's what Kevin O'Connell wants to do, and the personnel says that that's the case. So, yeah, I think we could see more volume than maybe we think initially, but it might take some time for JJ to kind of develop over the course of the season.
All right, so we got some other wide receivers in this tier that I think we're at a crossroads. Like, I've talked a lot of JSN, and I've kind of dug a little deeper, but it's like, hey, I want to see something year 2. We've talked about George Pickens a ton. I mean, and he might be one of our most talked about players on all of our Footballers podcasts. Mike, you have Rashee Rice on here.
Yeah.
For many reasons of like why he's at the crossroads, but what are your thoughts on him?
It's just the crossroads. So this is one of the worst things about fantasy football and just in the NFL. Look, it's off the field stuff that sucks. Look, there's humans, and humans make mistakes, and Rashee Rice clearly made a massive mistake that there will be a penalty for him. We still don't know what it is. And like, trying to factor in that risk, like off the field risk for us as we sit at home in our parents' basements, trying to judge the character of these guys, like it's an impossible game. But we have to accept. Like, think about where we had the excitement for Rashee Rice before any of the stuff in Dallas happened. Like, that dude was on a rocket ship to being one of people's favorite dynasty wide receivers, a player who actually came through for Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and looks like their number 1 wide receiver moving forward, even though he has limitations as a player. Like, he's a more of a yards after contact. Maybe he could turn into like a Deebo Samuel type, because his route tree, it's not refined as it should be for an NFL, a number 1 NFL wide receiver. But yet, After the bye week, he was like, there was a game of 13%. I'm going to remove that. So week 12 through 17, 27% of the targets. And then in the playoff run, 8 targets, 9, 4, 12. He was really involved. And it's taking the human part out, because if you don't want if you don't want players who are doing that crap on your team, I totally get it. But just production-wise, let's say he gets a 6 or 8 game suspension, but that's it. And then the rest of his career, Rashee Rice is like, he turns it around. He looks at his mistake and goes, I'm not going to do that crap again. And then he's the player who he was before that, and then starts getting better. And he actually is the number 1 wide receiver for Patrick Mahomes. I think that is, those outcomes aren't being looked at as much as they used to. Because the first round draft pick of Xavier Worthy, that's really exciting. He's a burner. What if it's just Rice, and Rice pays his penalty, and you could get a huge, massive discount on him right now, and he's at the crossroads and he figures it out? That's what I'm saying. I don't know that he will, but I'm just throwing it out like that. We need to think of that as an option.
Yes. And I'm looking at this tier, and when you have everybody ranked for 2024, it feels all clean and neat because, like Mike's mentioned, we're not mentioning all the variables of where things could change, but I don't think he'll be here next year. It's either up or down, but I don't think it's just going to stay status quo for him. So a year from now, if he remains a wide receiver 1, I think he tiers up in a group where you're like, okay, you've established yourself 2 years with Patrick Mahomes as you're the guy, and Kelsey's getting older, where, with Worthy, there is a fear that he becomes a gadget player for a team that hasn't excelled in downfield stuff. Patrick Mahomes had 1 touchdown of 20-plus air yards last year. So if you don't get that, it might be different. But you also could see
there's fair concern that Rashee Rice will only be a gadget player too. I think
a little yak guy.
That's a fair thing
it.
to say. But it's not this. It's not exactly the same. But if you've played Dynasty fantasy football for 5 years, I can't remember exactly when it was. Tyreek Hill had an off season where he had some really bad off the field stuff. And the fantasy football community was, and because I think the consensus, just NFL fans, is he will never play football again. He's done. It is absolute toast. This guy was in the double-digit rounds of startup drafts. I mean, from where he was, which a top 15 guy, absolutely plummets. People are sending out fire sale trade offers. You're rejecting it because you're sending me a player who's never going to play another snap in the NFL again, and now Tyreek Hill is the number 1 guy or number 2 guy going into next year, at least for redraft speaking. Just so I'm not saying Rice is on that career path, but just these are factors of what the value of a player is, and it's emotionally tough.
Yeah, and that's a good point to bring that up, just because it does invite a buying opportunity. If you want to take on that risk, now's the time, right? I don't know, what would a fair offer be at this point with the off the field concerns and all that stuff? An early second, maybe a late first.
That might get it done.
And man,
it may get it done. That pick
usually doesn't work out anyway, and we already know Rashee Rice is good, right? The per route numbers were off the charts. It's Pat Mahomes. I'm kind of talking myself into making some trade offers for Rashee Rice with that at the crossroads of the career. The other thing for me that I think about with the offense and kind of how it sets up, just from taking off the field stuff, off the conversation for a minute, it's you have Xavier Worthy, you have Hollywood Brown. In theory, those guys can really open up the offense. And underneath, last year we saw Kelsey eat and Rashee Rice eat. And I think about Kelsey's role in the offense, and I've already talked about it. He's probably going to play fewer snaps during the regular season. We want to keep him safe for the playoffs and healthy. And it's the less that Kelsey plays, the more opportunity for Rashee Rice to just be a target hog, which he was at times last year underneath and in the intermediate area of the field, where he is so good. It just matches up perfectly with the personnel and how it fits. And I guess I'm in on Rashee Rice. It's the take home here.
Oh no.
What could go wrong?
I'm not trying to talk everyone into it. I just want people
it's a good thought exercise.
Don't just be hey, Xavier Worthy, first round pick. He's now their number 1 wide receiver.
Yeah.
A reminder that they have missed on a lot of players besides, I mean, Rice is like the biggest success as of late.
I think that's a good theme for this episode so far, is looking at players that we had an opinion, or at least, we were on the fence, and at least be able to give the other side. Like, I wanted to look at Jordan Addison because the feeling I got was like, do I really want this player?
Yeah.
And going a little deeper, like, here's how it could work. This next tier, I'm calling the old guard, because all of these dudes last year, if you would have traded them away, you would have gotten a lot more, and then they've sunk in dynasty value just from being old. So a lot of guys that are old in this tier, right now I have them wide receivers 34 through 46. So Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, Stefon Diggs, Amari Cooper, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk, Terry McLaurin, Keenan Allen, pour one out, Calvin Ridley, Deontay Johnson. And then in the middle of that group is a bunch of rookies that were like, I don't really know where to stick them. Like, what is Xavier Legette, Ricky Pearsall? Who is he? How did he even get drafted in the first round? And then Adonai Mitchell. So it's like all of these guys, the old guys, and then we don't know what to do with these wide receivers. So the old guys is what I want to focus on, because is there still something left in the tank that you can trade for? And so the player that I dug deep on is Stefon Diggs, because my sentiment has been he's done. He's out. They moved on. And so I'm going to give the case, or at least the thought of how could it work in Houston? Because what's been y'all's opinion so far of him moving there and the offseason?
I think there's the overall for our shield for the fantasy footballers has been far more negative than like his ADP in the consensus. So it's been bad.
Yeah, I mostly feel the same, just kind of in general. I mean, Diggs is still a very, very good target earner, in my opinion, but he's just not the same player he was. So, like, how does he mesh with the offense, and does he line up in the slot mostly at this stage of his career? And do they run 3 wide receiver sets a ton, you'd think, to get these guys on the field all together because they're your best players? Like, it all makes sense to me, but I just think so highly of Nico and Tank. Like, I think those guys are both legit superstars that it's tough to see how it works for all 3 guys, in my opinion.
It's also hard to see players that, like, I remember when Diggs was a rookie and 5th round pick coming out of Maryland, it's like, this is a fun player. And in Dynasty, you felt like you got somebody just off the waiver wire or late in your draft. And then over time, he ascends into this alpha, and you're like, that is a fun Dynasty player. Now you're at the part of his career where it's like, oh, that was nice. He's done. And you're looking at all these other younger, sexier options. So I think you mentioned it, Betz, like, is he the slot wide receiver? That's kind of the question that I have, because Tank, you would think he is, smaller dude, but most of his routes were outside. He only saw 1 target behind the line of scrimmage. So at the end of the day, I think it's Nico outside. I think Tank and Diggs can be interchangeable, but also this team runs a ton of stupid 21 personnel where they get fullback on the field, Andrew Beck. Like, it's kind of annoying if you're playing fantasy and you really watch, you're like, why is this team trying to do Kyle Juszczyk over and over and over again and have a ton of snaps where the third wide receiver...
Kyle. You don't know ball.
Apparently I don't, because it blows my mind, but also it works in the NFL. So Diggs has been way better when it's just 2 wide receivers on the field because there's less competition. So will be his biggest test. So if he is the slot wide receiver and this team just says, all right, we're going to throw out some of that 21 stuff and just go for it, that's fine. This is year 9 for him. He's 30 years old, but he did earn the same targets down the stretch. They just weren't as valuable targets. Like, he's not a deep threat anymore. He's not what he used to be. He can get the intermediate area where he was actually tied for the league lead in receiving touchdowns in the 11 to 19 area. So he's still viable. He's not toast. And I think the system can work. But right now, like, you don't want to trade for Stefon Diggs. And if you have him, it's like, do I want to get a second for Diggs? No. Like, I want to see if I still have somebody who can be top 15 or whatever. So I'm still holding on as a Diggs Dynasty manager, hoping that he's alive.
With sky-high confidence. Just so confident, Kyle. I love it. Do you still have him on your team in Dino Jr.?
Yeah, I got that Josh Allen Diggs stack.
The uncorrelated
right?
stack for this year. Love it.
Oh, man. I did remember us talking about Adams and Diggs and Kupp last year and saying, like, okay, they still have a ton of... I mean, Cooper Kupp in redraft, what, was a top 5 pick? Like, he was going as wide receiver 2 or 3?
Early before the ankle injury, the training camp injury.
We didn't know Puka even existed. So there was a point with these guys in Dynasty where you could have gotten a haul, and a year later, it's like, you're not getting that for Adams, you're not getting that for Kupp or Diggs. So that's kind of my biggest lesson in this tier is you'd rather be a year early. I think with Mike Evans, we feel good about him getting the bag and securing a couple more years. But Calvin Ridley, speaking of bags, he's 29. He feels like he should still be 25 or 26. So Betz, talk to me about if that could even work with the Titans, and is he even their best wide receiver?
I'm not sure, man. I don't know. I mean, if you look at the numbers from last year, basically everything is going to tell you that DeAndre Hopkins, who, is 32 years old, so he's older, is just producing at a higher level on a per route basis than Calvin Ridley. And, we joked a lot about Will Levis at the top of the show, and watching some of his tape, it's a wild ride. And really the numbers support, it was truly awful. Among 48 quarterbacks with 100 plus dropbacks last year, 31st in EPA, 30th in passer rating, 42nd in catchable target rate. So we're asking a lot for Calvin Ridley to, change teams at this stage of his career, go compete with DeAndre Hopkins for targets, and have a quarterback take a huge step forward who was really, really not good last year. So I get the contract is great. It's nice to have that financial security on your roster. I think when we look back in the offseason after this year, and we're talking about the Titans and we're talking about that contract they gave to Calvin Ridley, I really see it as a situation where we're like, dude, what was that deal? And now we're talking about a player who's declining, entering his age 30 season. He turns 30 in December. And, he had that 1 year with the Falcons where he was unbelievable. I'll give him that, right? 2.44 yards per route run, off the charts. But in his career, I mean, he's only played 5 seasons and one of them was shortened. So it's 4.5, but 1.57 yards per route run a year ago, it's fine. 1.43 the year before, it's fine. 1.69, 1.77 in his other seasons. He's had one really good year. And I just think the name value carries so much that I'm kind of out at this point. I see his value declining. I'm not really in redraft leagues. I'm not really in Dynasty. I just don't see it as a perfect fit. And I think it's a player that, like I said, we're hanging on to the name value a little bit here when truthfully he hasn't been that good on a per out basis.
You have to do this weird dance where you're blending Calvin Ridley from the Jaguars. So we're not, like you said, with the Falcons, it was cool. It was fun. Great rookie year. Great couple of years there. But you're blending him from the Jaguars. You're taking Will Levis, who played in an offense that was Derrick Henry, right? It was just not fit for him. And then you're bringing it all together with Brian Callahan, who brings a Cincinnati offense. So you're really taking 3 offenses and asking, can it work? And what you're going to see is a ton of shotgun, which is great. I think Levis is better in that. And just let him sling it. Just go for it. And you saw Hopkins come up with a ton of awesome highlight reel catches. The problem is, Will Levis in shotgun last year, guys. I hate to tell you this. It wasn't great. That's the system we're going to get. But he was 28th out of 34 quarterbacks in fantasy points per dropback. And then here's the worst. He was dead last in off target rate. So it's a lot of targets didn't really matter. So I worry about Ridley. I think he'll be fine in terms of staying in this tier at least one more year. But I think it's really hard. I mean, last year, he had 5 games. We can look at his game logs, but I think it was 5 good games and the rest killed your team, especially because week 1 was a tease.
Yep.
A huge tease.
We went right from training camp. This guy looks incredible in camp. We've never seen anybody run drills this way, which he was running them next to Zay Jones. So it's not shocking that he looked so good.
Why has Zay Jones got to catch something
Zay.
That right
Zay's,
now?
Dude, hat tip to Zay, right? His career was off the rails. He came back. He's been productive. So hat tip to Zay. But and then
he had a stint
on
the Raiders, right?
In training camp, he was incredible. And then the truth kind of came out, of course, down the stretch. So, yeah, I don't know, man. I think his value is going to sink. We're talking about a player next year that the conversation is, well, he's 30. Who's the quarterback? He's going to be 31 in December. I just think it's a good time to get out.
All right, let's take one more break and we'll get to some more tiers. We are moving on. I'm calling it Tier 7, Young and Hungry, because there's a bunch of young dudes here that were drafted a little bit later. A couple of names in here where you're like, okay, still young. Don't know what to do with Jameson Williams or Christian Watson. But Jermaine Burton, Roman Wilson, Troy Franklin, who I think just slowly but surely has just been dying in best ball drafts, just off a cliff. And then
It's too bad.
Jalen Polk is an interesting name to put in this list too.
Hold on, say that again.
I've heard both.
I was going to
Jalen
ask.
Polk and Jalen.
No. We don't. Look, we don't just move on from those things. Or what is this?
Jalen Polk or Jalen Polk?
I've never heard it. John, like there's a controversy here.
I'm going to create one now.
Did you just make that up, Kyle?
I want to get it right. I
hear so many things. I don't know what's right anymore. I'm bound to mess it up, but let's go with Jalen right now.
I think it's Jalen.
It's fun.
Okay, drop your bit, Kyle. How do you
I don't
actually
know.
say it? All right.
Ja Rule Polk.
No, you can't. Well, that name's taken. That was a coach.
All right, so young dudes in here, and then we talked Jameson Williams a lot, so I don't know if we need to do that. I think we've had like 2 or 3 episodes where we covered Jameson Williams.
Well, I can give you just a quick...
Go for it.
So what I've done with the running backs, I'm also starting to do that now with the wide receivers. And so since 2014, we have 53 in the sample size who have hit a top 24 season. The amount of the 53 that their first time doing it was in year 3. That's what we're in for Jameson Williams right now. Is that correct?
Year 3.
That's 12 of the 53. And 4 of those would have been first-round picks, so yeah, I mean, look, you had Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Ayuk, Hollywood Brown, and Nelson Aguilar.
The GOAT.
It was a slow burn.
And all 3 of them, by the way, Ayuk was okay, but the other ones they barely snuck in. So just saying, historically, it's not looking good.
Yeah. Famous last words. I'm betting against it.
We talked about it a lot.
Against him, or you're betting against the history and you're going to be in on Jameson Williams?
No, I'm betting against Williams.
Okay.
Yeah. I think he is, and we talked about him a ton on the show. I think he is perfect for this offense. Fills a need, is going to stretch the field, is going to have some splash plays.
As the 5th target on this offense.
But is probably at best 4th, right? Like if Gibbs takes a step forward as a pass catcher, Amon-Ra is healthy.
He's pushing to be a starter, I've heard.
If Laporta is healthy, I just don't see how it works. So I'm out.
It's a good thing that Jared Goff throws it deep a ton,
Yeah.
Lowest percentage in the league. So it's like the targets we want, he's not throwing them. So then it's like, okay, I want him to get open, to get zone. In the intermediate, it's like, it just doesn't go there. The ball hasn't gone there. And that's where they were successful last year. Could it be different? Yes. They could change. They can morph. But I think he's going to be one of those players you're like, okay, he caught a touchdown this week. Okay, 2 weeks from now, he ruined my team. And he's still holding value, though. Like, I think people view him higher than where we have him ranked right now. We have him at wide receiver 50 in Dynasty. We can check where the pulse is, but I feel like it's a little higher.
I mean, it's wild. The people holding on to Jameson's, you're because that's what you're doing at this point. You're holding on to your evaluation of him before he was an NFL player. And again, he has the traits, like it can work, but that's the Jameson Williams truthers. It's tough right now. It's tough in the streets.
I'll compare him to a player that I'd rather have in Dynasty. Same year in the league, Christian Watson.
You'd rather have Watson?
I'd rather have Watson, at least take the chance, because one, I think the offense can actually use him. He was the one, if you look at just when he was on the field, from a target share. Now, I don't have a medical degree, but I do have a list of every single injury that he's ever had going back a really long way. So, Betz, you tell me, I'm not going to read the list, but like, is he finally healthy? I need to know, like personally.
So he's interesting, right? And my comp for him in just how he's viewed in fantasy football world, it's not necessarily the same injuries. Well, to some degree it is, but not necessarily the same complete injury history, but just most recently. Do you guys remember the 2 or 3 years where we got burned over and over and over again by Will Fuller? And then it got to a point where everyone was like, I'm out. I'm not doing this. No matter what the price is, I am just out. And it's like, well, hold on. He's going in the 8th round or the 9th round. The risk is already baked in. Deshaun Watson was good at that point. Why don't we just dip our toes back in and see what happens? And to me, that feels like the exact same thing with Christian Watson, where he's produced, right? He's produced on an NFL field. Yes, he struggled with injury, but this is one of my things I'm looking at in my article is like This guy in redraft league is going in the 9th round currently over on Sleeper. And it's like, man, in a redraft league, like there's no downside. Like just jump in, and if it doesn't work, like, you move on. So it's a different conversation for Dynasty, but I do think I've come around to the idea of like, I think the risk is baked in not only in redraft ADP, but Dynasty trade markets. Everyone was so hyped for Watson last year, and now everyone's like, I don't know, man, Dontavian Wicks is the hotness. Like, I'd rather have Dontavian Wicks or Jaden Reed, who we all
he's
like.
He's the hotness because he's the lowest value one still.
Yeah, for sure. But I think just to take a step back from like the injury standpoint too, like if the Packers are a little bit concerned about his injury profile and his history, they do have everything in place to make it work. Like maybe he's not a 90% snap guy, right? Like they can rotate guys, they can get other guys in and make it all work. But I just think it's at a point now where I'm willing to buy back in because I think the risk is already baked in enough to his ADP.
Yeah, through 2 years, his targets per out run is 22%, so it's very, very good. Yards per out run is 1.91, so he's hitting above the thresholds I care about through 2 years. Now, a lot of the targets have been deep downfield stuff, 12 touchdowns on just 69 receptions. It's really hard to look at other players and use that type of rate, but I think that's the kind of player we're getting, right? It's this big play guy. I did look up his catchable deep targets last year. It was 8th worst, so the deep targets he got, only 47% of them were catchable. Romeo Doubs, same offense, same everything, 75% of them were catchable. That was the 4th best. So that's some weird variance. I think year to year that changes. And then my biggest question is 2 wide sets. Is he on the field there? Because Jaden Reed, I looked this up, he ran 2 routes last year with 2 wide receivers on the field. 2.
That's wild.
Yeah.
That is wild.
And yet Jaden Reed was targeted and down the stretch was like their Debo, right? Their Debo light of just all over the field. So I can't argue against Jaden Reed not being, when he's on the field, he's awesome on a per route basis. But Christian Watson is the deep target guy. I just think you can make a case for Watson, for Reed, for Doubs, for Wicks, and even the Butterman, Bo Melton. Like you could really make a case for all of these dudes. But I think I just like Watson a lot. I think he's too cheap. And would you rather have Watson or a second?
Watson.
Okay. I think that's the price of what you can get. Like nobody's going to ask you for a first for Christian Watson right now. So I think you can kind of make that trade and ask yourself, like the guys that are in this tier that I mentioned were guys you took in your second round of your rookie draft. Roman Wilson. Would you rather have Roman Wilson or Christian Watson?
Watson,
yeah.
Okay. Troy Franklin, I think we'd all say Christian Watson over him.
Yes, yeah.
What about Jermaine Burton?
I think Watson.
Oh, man. That one is...
A year from now, we could have a different conversation about Burton.
Yeah, that's everything to me on Jermaine Burton is next year, like just going through a scenario of this year, many scenarios. We live in the multiverse. But in the scenario where Joe Burrow is back and Joe Burrow puts up the numbers that he had put up the 2 years where he had the huge seasons, he puts those up and T. Higgins is gone. Like, it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter what Jermaine Burton had done to that point because his value will just skyrocket. So that's why I'm hesitant of. And look, to me, honestly, there still is that small percentage chance that the Bengals all sing Kumbaya together and they figure it out and they figure out how to get T. Higgins money. Like, I'm not completely ruling that out, even though that seems like the high probability of thing. The highest probability taking place is Higgins leaves, and then Burton's value skyrockets. So again, that's a huge word salad of saying Burton versus Christian Watson. I think is an extremely difficult decision because just play it out. Okay, let's play it out that way. T. Higgins is gone. Joe Burrow was super good this year. Next year, how do you envision? Do you feel like you're going to have Burton ranked higher than Christian Watson? Because I think I would.
I think you still might be looking at potential for him, like where you're still like baking in, like I think this is what he can become. So
you're a hater. I'm going to go to Betz on this question because he was Team Burton.
The problem is that deep targets and Joe Burrow isn't even their best quarterback. Like that's the issue.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Kyle,
this guy.
You stop it. Mike, I don't know if you've heard, but Kyle's come around to Jermaine Burton as a best ball pick this year, which makes me very happy to hear he's
fun and
he's on board
for sure.
But I'm with you. Like I do think that there's a world where like that all happens, and we're like Burton could be the 2, but then you're going to be sweating the NFL draft. Like if they lose T. Higgins and Burton is like fine but not great,
for sure,
or if he's just a situational deep threat and can't really earn his way on the field as like a legit starting NFL player, then you have a situation of like, what is his role in the offense? You know, so that kind of creates it. So I have no idea where his value is going to go. I think we all agree on that with Jermaine Burton. I was so in on him in Dynasty rookie season because his price was so cheap. But just talking about these 2 players, usually I'll side with the guy that's like shown it on the field and produced. So that's why I lean Watson, but I could see a world where Burton's value is much higher next year.
Yeah, it's that world, and you can envision a world for the Green Bay Packers where we have debated every single wide receiver on their roster. Like, there's a world where it's just, hey, all the Green Bay Packers wide receivers are usable for fantasy football, but there is no true number 1.
I'm going to move to the final tier here of our top 60 wide receivers in Dynasty, and I'm calling it Who Knows in 2025, because it's a bunch of dudes that I have no idea, but I want to list their name, and I want to see if we're on the same page, because there's really only one name on here I can see like move up a couple tiers, and I could be way wrong. But down here we have Hollywood Brown, Josh Downs, Jahan Dotson, Cortland Sutton, DeAndre Hopkins, Gabe Davis, rest in peace, and Romeo Doubs. So
he's filthy rich now.
3 years,
I'm
39 mil for Gabe. Okay, so you watch yourself, Kyle.
He's going to be a fun player. Like the thing about Gabe Davis, especially in fantasy world, he's going to be a thing like 5 years from now. We're going to be like, you guys remember Gabe Davis? And we're going to have fun with it. Like, he's a fun player.
Where is he going in best ball? Because I feel like the sentiment around Gabe Davis
is bad. It's pushed way
down. He's like 140, somewhere around there.
The way we're playing this is that they just threw all that money in the garbage. Like, the team has absolutely no idea what they're doing. And they gave him that because they signed a rookie in the first round of the draft. I'm not caping here for Gabe Davis.
No, I hear what you're saying.
Pointing out that usually seems like a discrepancy that we need to examine.
What's wild with the Calvin Ridley thing, no one expected him to leave, right? Like, I think Jacksonville was like, we're getting him back. Like, we'll sign him. 2 or 3 year deal, whatever. But like, I think in hindsight, they're like, maybe we shouldn't have given Gabe all that money. Like, we could use that for Calvin Ridley. And I truthfully think Gabe is going to be on the first team all cardio this year, just win sprints left and right down the field.
Yeah, the problem with Davis and Brian Thomas is they just have never earned targets. I know you're comparing college stuff, but like, they don't earn targets the way that Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram do. So I just worry about how the offense is going to function where you do have a lot of 9 routes from Gabe Davis. And he knows how to do it, though. That's the best part. This dude knows how to run straight down the field and have a 4-touchdown game, though. I mean, that's legendary stuff. Betz, that changed your life with DFS.
That was a pretty sweet moment in the fantasy football world for Gabe Davis. That was his high, and I don't think we'll ever get close to anything back to that. But hey, everyone has their day, Kyle.
All right, so the wide receivers are listed. Is there one in here? Because I have one that could jump a tier or 2 after this year.
I mean, you're going to talk about Jahan Dotson, aren't you?
He's the only one I can see. I mean,
no. Oh, not Kyle.
If I had to pick one, if that's the exercise, you have to pick one.
Oh, no.
I mean, if I had to pick one, and I don't really think this is how I feel, but if I was like, you're forcing me to pick one of these guys, I do see a world where it works for Hollywood and he gets a bag of money next year. I'm not on that side, but I see that it exists, right? Like, it's like, oh, this guy's playing with Patrick Mahomes. He just played with Josh Dobbs last year. No wonder his numbers are better. I see the simplistic case for it, but you and I, and we've talked a lot, Kyle, about his numbers against zone and how he's not really fitting today's NFL and that sort of thing. So I'm not on that side, but I see that path. So if I was going to pick one, he'd be the one for me.
Mike?
Oh man. If I have to pick one that's going to take a tier jump.
Come on.
It's probably Dobbs.
Man.
I'm
so close.
I'm infatuated. I'm infatuated with the Packers wide receivers again, I'm trying to lay out all the different cases, but part of, I think, the allure of the Packers wide receivers is that other than Jaden Reed, they're all so cheap in terms of their value. Like, and there is a world where one of them really takes off and becomes the true guy for Jordan Love. So if I got to pick anyone out of this one, I feel like we should at least talk about Josh Downs. Like, he feels like he's just completely left for no one. No one ever talks about Josh Downs.
Okay, so it's so funny. I don't know if you remember our rookie show last year. Jason hated him.
Yeah, he hated Josh Downs. Yeah.
He hated Josh Downs to the point of just taking it way too far. I mean, it hurt me because he's a Georgia boy, and I liked him for that reason. He's a UNC guy, and I was in on him. Now I've flipped, where Jason, I think, has liked him more. And
that's hilarious.
So anti-Downs this whole offseason. We've talked about him in best ball. I
will say for Josh Downs, like, to me, you can go glass half full or half empty. You can look at what he did last year, where he had a month run where wide receiver 18, 29, 3, 35. Like, that's a good run in a rookie year, but that was in the middle, and it ended very poorly. So for you to put that on the field and then nothing changes in the positive for you as a player, it actually goes really, really bad at the end. And I know he was banged up. You know, we had that week 9. Let's see, what he hurt his knee. I don't know if that was the reason, but yeah, I mean, I just wanted to talk about it.
Yeah,
now that we've talked about it, I figured it out. I'm out.
I do think that knee injury was more serious than people let on. There was reports about it of he was managing it for months. So I think at least in part you can explain that.
I'm back in.
So I'm back in.
But his knee's really weak, though. It's really weak.
Oh, I'm back out.
Oh, come on, Kyle. I think he's a talented player. Like, we saw flashes of it as a rookie, and you're like, okay, year 2 player. That's generally what we look for. The tough part for me is this team has Jonathan Taylor finally now healthy and contracted in the rearview mirror. Anthony Richardson's going to run a ton, and Michael Pittman is the RPO guy. So it's where is their volume for both A.D. Mitchell and him to actually succeed for fantasy, assuming Pittman is healthy? So I kind of feel like he's a fine PPR bench wide receiver to have that I'd be happy to have, but I don't really see him being a true breakout guy this year.
Yeah, I think the Colts offense, which is basically just the Eagles offense, that's where Shane Steichen's from, it never really is funneled through the slot. And what if I told you, Mike, this is the way you're right here. What if I told you he ran 8 total routes last year with 2 wide receivers on the field?
Downs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's just the question, is how much is going to be on the field, how much is he going to get peppered when it was Gardner a lot of times. So that's kind of my question. And then I'll end this with Dotson. I don't know, but at least there's some variables with Jaden Daniels. And that's what I like. It's better than Sam Howell. I think we'd all agree that Jaden Daniels, that's a huge revelation, I know, for all of us, might be better than Sam Howell.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
You guys don't even like that's a great point. It's a really thought out, deep point.
It's really
First
hard.
round wide receiver.
It's really hard to hear you talk about Dotson and take things seriously.
Didn't you tell us he was a good trade for candidate last year, Kyle?
All right, next segment.
Take it or leave it.
All right, let's just finish out with a couple of quick takes that won't be about Jahan Dotson, but of all the players we talked about today, who are you most afraid of dropping in value, and who will gain the most value? So a couple of quick hitters here. Betz, just go for it. You
didn't even see the show doc. You just said we're not going to talk about Deshaun Dotson, but I was ready for you to come on and be like, this is the time to buy.
Lose value. He's already left for dead.
Here's the thing with Jahan Dotson. Okay, last year was terrible. You don't need us to tell you that. Obviously it was bad, but 0.82 yards per route run. He earned a target on just over 12% of his routes. That is backup numbers in terms of how he performed. Now, he will start for this team. I'm not saying that, but just as a talent on the field last year, that's how bad it was. And then I took a step back and I was like, okay, as a rookie, were we just fooled? Did we actually get fooled as a rookie? Because most of his production was propped up by touchdowns, just over 500 yards, 7 touchdowns on 35 catches. Not sustainable. And then we saw a huge regression last year. But peel back the curtain, 1.39 yards per route run as a rookie, 14.9% targets per route run as a rookie. I'm a big fan of ESPN's Open Score looking at just does the player create separation? Are they getting in a position for their quarterback to succeed? He's been right next to Gabe Davis the last 2 years. So Yikes. I'm just like, I get that he was a first round talent and I did like him as a rookie, but I'm just kind of taking a step back and being like, are we just ignoring last year and like trying to move on past it? Because there was numbers from his rookie year that say maybe he was valued too highly, and I'm starting to think that that's the case. So if it doesn't go well this year, his value is done. It's gone.
Yeah, I'm done. Mike, you got any names you want to mention?
Just the one I'm terrified of losing value, because that's how the question was phrased to me, and it's Garrett Wilson. Of if something goes wrong this year.
I've been bringing up the down case. Betz has been the other side.
Kyle doesn't like the good football players.
Because like both are, I think, worth talking about. Of Garrett Wilson is a great player. He's a great wide receiver. He can get open. He can make very difficult catches. So if everything goes hunky-dory with Aaron Rodgers here, he will return value. He'll come through. But as we saw, there's like, it can go really bad. It is scary to look at that of what could happen with his career and what his value is in Dynasty, of thinking you have a locked-in top 10 guy for multiple years and not actually getting it would be terrible.
Would it help you to know that I'm in the middle of the Garrett Wilson every single target that he's had in the NFL thread?
I'm happy to hear about it.
Man, it's rough. Like a couple times Zach Wilson throws the ball 100 miles an hour at him, and it is nowhere close to him, but he throws it really hard.
Right, but I'm saying, like, when you're watching it, are you like, that a better pass, and that's an easy reception?
I think what my takeaway so far has been he moves differently. Like Garrett Wilson just moves differently, and that's something overall that is an alpha trait. I think that's what you're saying, Betz, right?
Yeah, I mean, he's just that good, right? Like, there's no question. No one's denying that. It's just the systemic risks with the Jets that I think, like last year, people were like, this is going to work. And yes, of course, no one saw Aaron Rodgers tearing his Achilles in week 1, but we're having the same exact conversation this year. We're like, this is going to work. Like, it's fine. It's going to work. And there is a
the
world.
Quarterback in question is on a repaired Achilles.
And in Egypt. And so who knows, right? I see where it goes so well for the Jets and they compete for the division. I also see a scenario where like they won 7 games again, so I see both sides.
I'm just going to quickly mention Cooper Kupp. I'm scared that a year from now, not only is he going to lose value, but like, he's like, I'm good. I don't have to do the NFL anymore. And Sean McVay does the same thing. So that's a fear. Love Cooper Kupp. And then
he's trying to take over our jobs, guys. He's doing podcasting now.
And he started a coffee company. I mean, props to him. I mean, he's a fan of us, right?
Hey, cash in, bro.
Got to.
Yeah, we love Cooper Kupp.
And then I just want to mention JSN because I've been doing some digger.
For loser, you have him in gain.
Yeah, like he's going to gain value. Like I think he's going to be good. That's how we're looking at it, right?
Dude, JSN is like the worst player to talk about because there's nothing. It's just literally nothingness. Of last year was brutal, and you're like, but I believed him in as a prospect. Maybe the team is a little bit better. Tyler Lockett's a year older. Like talking into existence the path forward is such this tiny little narrow beam of light.
Just needs to stay on the field.
And yet he seemed like he should be one of the next big things in the NFL, and betting on that feels bad right now.
Oh, I'm not saying you need to go trade for him. I'm saying if you have him, don't sell him.
Oh yeah, if you have JSN, I'm holding.
Oh, we got so many offers.
I will go down with that ship.
Yeah, no, like he's going to be on the field, 3 wide receiver sets. I mean, he ran 14 routes with 2 wide receivers on the field. That's what I've been looking at all day. It's like, okay, are they even on the field? He wasn't. So hopefully this new system, he's a little bit better. But he's being poo-pooed on. People don't like him.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And when he's on your team, you got to stick up for your guys. So that's going to do it for this episode. Make sure you check out the Ultimate Draft Kit, and we'll be back talking Dynasty running backs next week.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.